Hello and welcome to the podcast. This is Ron's Amazing Stories, and welcome to the month of Spooky 2018. During this month, you can expect the unexpected, hear the unbelievable, and witness stories that stretch the imagination. It's my hope that we chill you a little and thrill you a little. On today's program, we have Schuler and Jordan from the Paranormal Investigation and Observation Team. They're here to tell us about ghost hunting and share a few stories. Also on the show, we will be presenting a short story from Amelia Allison, and Jason Dowd makes an appearance to update us on the Horror Express and even tells us a ghost story. I want to thank all of you that have supported the month of Spooky 2018. Your stories have been the reason for the best year ever. So, let's eat, drink, and be scary. Here is this week's special 5-Minute Mystery.
Another 5-Minute Mystery.
This 5-Minute Mystery is being brought to you by the Paranormal Investigation and Observation Team from Indianapolis, Indiana. They've been conducting investigation as a free service to the community since 2011. More about them later, but for now, here is our story.
Hello. Yes, this is Dr. Fangfist. You again. Look here. Now you listen to me. You've shot me, then blown me up. Well, this just isn't cricket. What? Turn around? What for? Oh my. This is bloody going to hurt.
Hey, Chief, I rounded up all the cows, but none of them were talking. Sure was a mess. How our killer got a stampede into the house is, well, a real head-scratcher. I don't know if it's important or not, but I found this recording labeled Tom Williams and the Spooky Dog. How about I play it right now for you, Chief?
It is a strange world. After hearing my story about the Black Panther in the courtyard, my sister finally confessed to something that happened to her years ago. She did have a little dog at the time. She has 2 now. But as she was sitting on the sofa, she thought she heard the little dog coming into the room with the tip-tap of the little paws on the floor. And she expected it to come around to look at her, as he usually did. But what came by was something totally different. It was a almost transparent dog, woolly-haired and black in color. As the dog got past her, he turned around, looked at her, and grinned with human teeth. And then he proceeded on into the hallway, where he ultimately disappeared. So I thank my sister for this story, and it is a spooky one. Sincerely, Tom.
Wow, Chief, this guy really must tick somebody off, 3rd time and all. You know, I wonder if all the king's horses and all the king's men will be able to put him back together again this time. Guess we'll see.
there you have another mystery. Thank you, Tom. You know, I'm really starting to feel bad for Dr. Fangfist. He's really having a rough time of it. This 5-Minute Mystery was brought to you by the Paranormal Investigation and Observation Team out of Indianapolis, Indiana. Why? Well, you know, it seemed like the thing to do. More about them later.
What's that you say?
I say I received this email from Matthew Sutton from Parts Unknown. Matthew writes, "Hello, Ron. I absolutely love this year's spooky event. It's my third, and so far it's the best ever. However, I do miss having a Horror Express this year. Can you please update us? Matthew." Well, Matthew, it's been all about time. Jason and I have missed the mark on getting together. It's not been a matter of, well, why am I telling you this when we can just talk to Jason and we can then tell you all about it together? How you doing, man?
I'm doing okay.
So let's just lay it out on the table. How much do you love doing the Horror Express?
Oh, it's one of my favorite things to do. Anything where I talk about the paranormal, that's top notch in my book.
And we have so much fun. The feedback I get from people is how much they like the way we converse back and forth and give each other, well, I'm going to say a bad word, crap. I think that'll fly on. I won't have to bleep that, will I?
No.
But we do. We have so much fun, and we have so much fun with the topics that we pick. Mm-hmm. And our next show, the one that we're going to get to, we're going to revisit Out of Body. And I have a person lined up that is an expert on the subject, and I think we're going to have a lot of fun with that.
Oh, I can't see why we wouldn't. I mean, that's always an amazing experience. And I know what it's like because I've had an out-of-body experience myself. I can only imagine what some of these other people go through. I mean, mine wasn't that terribly scary, but I mean, I know what it does to a person just to experience it. So yeah, I love talking about that kind of stuff.
So let's be honest with everybody out there and say that what's happened is it's been a combination of health, busyness, and just downright unbelievable years. I mean, you've had a hurricane, for heaven's sakes. Two, that's right. So it's just, that is what's prevented us from doing the Horror Express. Nothing else, right?
Nothing else, nope.
I thought it would be good for us to just get together and so people could hear that we're getting along and that we are, in fact, going to get back out there and start doing more Horror Expresses and get back on at least trying to get 2 or 3 of these out a year. Yes,
absolutely.
All right, Jason, it's the Halloween season. And you know what I'm going to ask?
Trick or treat?
No. No. And you know what? Before I get into what I was going to do, why don't you tell us about dog treats?
Oh, yeah, my dog treats. Well, I had a pretty horrible experience happen this year with my dog. And basically, I lost one of my dogs from treats I gave her, and I almost lost the other one. She became very, very sick. And the doctor said, you cannot give her any treats. And I'm like, you cannot just tell a dachshund no. So I sat down and I wrote down what they needed to, get the treats. And I went to the stores. I could not find it. If I did find it, it was so expensive. It was like $30 for just a few treats. I'm like, that's ridiculous. So what I decided to do was I created my own treats. And the dogs love them. I have all different flavors. And so just because you think that it's low fat, that you can't have pork, well, that's not true at all. And, you couldn't use beef. Well, that's not true at all. And these dogs are going crazy for them. So I've been finding just nice, healthy ways to get my dog something that she loves. And it's great for dogs that have health issues like mine does, who has acute pancreatitis and cannot just eat anything. Lots of great stuff going on. And it's a lot of fun.
Do you have some place that people could go to find out more about it?
Yep. It's www.gladdysgoodies.com. That's GLADDYSGOODIES.com. And it's also on Amazon and Etsy too now.
Great. All right. So back to what I was saying. So it is the Halloween season. Mm-hmm. And now I'm going to say it again. I think you know what I'm going to ask you for.
I think I do.
So do you have a ghost story for us to close this little segment off?
Of course I do. Actually, this is kind of interesting because it just happened to me this year. A long time ago, when I had a dog named Buttons, I was trying out for some things novelty stuff like mugs and little statues and coasters and stuff. And one of the coasters I have, it looks like it's made of plaster and it has like a cork background to it. And they're extremely heavy. They came in a set of 4, but each one weighs probably about a pound or so because they're quite heavy. And I had one sitting out there on the table in between my 2 chairs. So after my dog Allie passed away this year and almost losing Gladys, came down to is one night I'm sitting here in the office and I was getting so frustrated and I was just tired. I was working really late. And all of a sudden this huge crash comes down and I was like, what the heck was that? So I went in and made sure Fran was okay and the dogs were okay. And they were all barking, they never left the room. So they're sitting there barking. And so I went looking around the house and didn't find anything wrong. I was like, wow, that was a loud crash to have nothing happen. So I came back in, worked, finished up what I needed to do, went back to bed probably around 1, 2 in the morning. And then the next morning, Fran gets up and she goes, what happened to this coaster? Well, the coaster shot about 10 feet, hit the wall on the other side of the living room and broke in 2. And it was a picture of my dog Buttons. And I was sitting there thinking to myself, wow, that's amazing because you can't just move these coasters. You really have to use a lot of extra force to make moves. So I don't know what happened, but I believe it had something to do with my other dogs saying that we're here, and not to forget us. And I would never forget them. So I think that was the kind of the basis behind why that happened. It hasn't happened since. It was just, like I said, right after we got the other dog. So I don't know if they were trying to get my attention, telling me, you did a good job or don't forget us or whatever it may be. But message was received either which way.
That's awesome. So kind of a head scratcher, but with feeling.
That's right. I can still feel them here with me. I know my dogs are here with me. I hear them panting sometimes in the middle of the night. And I look down, there's nobody there. Or I hear scratches on the door because I keep my door closed because I do audio at nighttime. And I don't want to wake anybody up. So, 1, 2 in the morning, that's just rude. So I hear scratch at the door, open it up, there's nobody there. So, I see a lot of that kind of stuff happen since these dogs have gone. But, it just lets me know that they're still with me.
Well, Jason, thank you for the ghost story. I'm sure the listeners appreciated it as well. I guess I have one last question for you. Any update on our doll puppet friend?
The puppet has not moved. I have done numerous investigations since then, trying to see if there's any EMF readings or if it moves or if I get any EVPs or anything. I haven't gotten anything. The only thing that we got was that one night, and I don't know if it was because of all the energy there or not, but the doll seems pretty calm. I don't have any problems with it. And it's still in the same position, same spot that I left it in over a year ago.
Do you think the storm may have had something to do with the strangeness you got?
Well, that's a very good possibility because when a storm comes, it does drive up a lot of energy and it puts the barometric pressure down and it can have other effects on you. It's kind of like the full moon. And if you've ever been through a hurricane at all, you know that just before it happens, it gets really, really muggy and it gets really, really calm. It's almost like you walk outside and you're sitting underneath a really thick comforter in your bed. And it's an eerie feeling. So, that kind of happens and it happens after the hurricane too. So the hurricane had just happened and that energy and those positive ions and negative ions and stuff that are floating around are still there. So it's a very good possibility that had some type of effect on it.
Well, Jason, I want to thank you for talking with us. I know that it's going to help a lot of people that have been asking me, where's Jason? And let them know that, hey, you're still there. I'm still here. And we're still planning on getting our Out of Body podcast done.
Yep, we will. We will get it done. I promise.
How about one more time on those dog treat URL?
Sure, it's www.gladdysgoodies.com, GLADDYSGOODIES.com. Find it on Amazon and Etsy, too.
Thank you, Jason. Well, Matthew, I hope I answered your question, and to Jason I say, you're the best, man. We are planning 2 shows. The first will be about the out-of-body experience, and then we want to do a Christmas Spirits program. That's the plan. And now, this. I've said this before, that when I first began podcasting, I had no idea that it would lead me to so many stories about the paranormal, and that it would change my viewpoint so drastically. What it really comes down to is, what kinds of stories do we like to hear? Hands down, it appears to be the spookier, the better. But whose job is it to collect these stories and then find out how real they are? In the end, it's the job of the paranormal investigator. On today's show, we've been blessed by 3. You've already heard from our very own Jason Dowd, who has been investigating the paranormal since he was about 12 years old. Next up, we'll hear from Schuler Johnson, who is a co-founder of the Paranormal Investigation and Observation Team. And later in the show, we'll hear from Jordan Childs, who is also a co-founding member. The team was founded on March 2nd, 2011, and what started out as a weekend hobby has since turned into a passion. P.I.O.T has undergone many investigations, including residential, abandoned business properties, and even historic landmarks. They have dedicated themselves to the paranormal world, not just for the thrills of hunting the unknown, but to discover the real answers through critical observation and bold interaction. So, I would like to introduce Mr. Schuler Johnson. Welcome to the podcast, Schuler.
Thank you for having me, Ron. It's great to be on board with you.
So, who are the Paranormal Investigations and Observation Team?
Well, Ron, we're kind of what the title says there. We're just a team of guys that got together back in 2011, and it started out as a hobby. You know, the weekends we'd get off from high school and want to go look for the spooky stuff. There's a lot more to the story than that, but just a group of guys that got together and made a paranormal team.
Let's talk about your very first paranormal investigation. Here you are, you're in high school, you said?
Yes, Ron.
So you're in high school. Was it kind of a joke at first, or were you thinking seriously that, hey, let's go out and do this? What was your thoughts at the very start?
Well, at the very start, Ron, especially being a junior at the time in high school, I wouldn't say it was so much of a joke, but it wasn't as serious as how things have gotten now. We just thought, this would be a fun thing to do instead of playing video games or going out in the woods and playing, military or whatever it was that we did back then. But it started out as just something to do on the weekend and see if the TV shows and the movies had any truth to it, to be honest.
And what did you discover?
Ron, I discovered that there's a lot of truth to the paranormal world. I mean, maybe not as crazy as what the movies and the TV shows kind of, display out there, but it's very true to say the least.
When do you think you realized that it wasn't a game anymore? Was there a moment?
Ron, something that really, I wouldn't say anything that actually threw itself in my face, but our very first investigation was March 2nd, 2011. And that very same night for our first investigation is at a cemetery. And we heard some really weird stuff, to say the least. I mean, it's a cemetery that's well kept, but there's not supposed to be anybody out there. And we heard what sounded like a little girl screaming for help. And that just creeped us out, and we couldn't see anybody of the physical matter. And that just, I don't know, words just can't describe being in that situation. But it made us believers right on the spot.
Did you investigate right then and there and try to figure out what was going on?
As terrified as we were, that is something that we did. We didn't run to it like we do now and like we should have, but we went towards the direction of where the scream came from. And we couldn't find anything. We couldn't find a night keeper. We couldn't find any animals. We especially didn't find a little girl. There was no one throughout the entire time that we were at the cemetery, and we were there for at least 6.5 hours.
Wow. And it just screamed through the night. There was no reason for it, just materialized.
Yeah, it just materialized, Ron. I mean, it's really weird when you try to pinpoint why it came about. I mean, yeah, we were talking to the quote-unquote spirits of the land that are said to be either stuck or they choose to stay there. But the little girl's scream just came out of nowhere, among other things, too. It's not just the little girl that screamed. We had some really weird sounds, like a rock being thrown. A really heavy rock was being thrown behind a headstone, and there was no rock to be found on the ground. There was nobody around us besides the 3 people, including myself, that was investigating that first investigation that we had. So it was weird.
So fast forward then to when you guys decided that you could start helping people with their paranormal issues.
Man, Ron, we're talking about a big jump. When we felt that comfortable and that professional, this would probably be the year of 2016.
Wow.
November.
So you spent 5 years in the trenches learning your craft then.
Yes, Ron, we did. A lot of experience, a lot of learning, a lot of, messing up, but it paid off because I personally feel, and I'm sure the rest of my team feels the same way, when it comes to something like this, especially if you don't have a certification or a giant book of documented proof, you really have to know what you're doing, or at least have enough experience to feel comfortable to say, hey, do this, don't do that.
When you first stepped out there and decided that you could help people, do you remember the first time you did that?
Yes, Ron. This would probably go back to the first month that we started this, which was November of 2016. And there was a home with 3 ladies. They were roommates, college kids. And they had reached out to us through email. And we had a website, of course, by this time, not just a Facebook page. And they said, hey, can you guys help us out? Do you know how to bring out a spirit or figure out if there's really a spirit here or not? We're like, sure, of course. So we went out there and we did our investigation for the evening. We spent 4 to 6 hours there. They didn't mind us being there. And they didn't feel like we needed to cleanse their home, which we are able to do as well. But they just wanted to know if something was really there or not. And we were able to find something.
Did it give them some comfort? Did it make them feel like that they were right, that they weren't crazy?
It sure did, Ron. Yeah, I feel like it helped everyone that lived in that home, that you have some strangers coming in and you're saying, hey, I think I have a ghost here. Please don't call me crazy and throw me in the loony bin, but can you help me out? And we did, and for sure that home has something there. So I do believe we helped them at least find some comfort.
How do you feel about the paranormal? Does it still terrify you, or do you have just a healthy respect for it?
A little bit of both, Ron. Going on almost 8 years now, I feel I'm not as terrified. There are some entities that feed off of fear and people being scared, and then there's also others that might take offense to it, like, oh, I didn't mean to scare you. But do I still have some fear when I do this stuff? Yes. Am I absolutely terrified? I wouldn't say so. It's more or less something following me home, and it's going to be a pain in the butt to get rid of it to where I can go back to sleeping normally. The respect aspect, absolutely. When it comes to the paranormal, especially our first 4 or 5 years of doing it, we didn't have much respect for the paranormal at all. I mean, we're just like a bunch of crazy kids trying to find some evidence that this stuff isn't just Hollywood make-believe, and where we're at now, yeah, there's a lot of respect for sure. You have to have respect for something like this.
Last week, my brother, we presented his story about when he was doing hospice in New Mexico for 5 years, and he was talking about dealing with the dying. He always asked for prayers of protection and protected himself against any evil that might come about from crossing that veil. How do you feel about that? Do you have similar practices to protect yourself?
Absolutely, Ron, and I respect what he's doing because, to say the least, it's very smart. When it comes to the paranormal, it's not just angels and demons as some people may think. It's everyday people, and you don't know people unless you live with them or you've known them for 10 plus years. But even then, what happens behind closed doors? This goes back to the respect thing. Whenever we originally started the whole paranormal thing, we didn't really do prayer. We didn't have much respect for the paranormal. But where we're at now, every investigation, we say a prayer before, sometimes during, if we feel threatened or there's something malevolent around us, and especially after. Even if we don't get anything for the night or we don't feel like this location has any activity, we say a prayer after, for sure. There's nothing wrong with being too safe.
I agree with that. And I know my brother would agree with you, too. Where do you see yourself today? What is life like for Schuler today?
Well, Ron, it's kind of weird to put in words, I guess, because I don't feel any different than I did, 7 years ago as who I am. I mean, I feel stronger. I feel like I have a lot more respect, not only for the paranormal, but myself. It's really helped me grow as a person and my character build. The paranormal team that I have, some people have came, through and left. Some people are still on the team from day one. But I feel like it's really changed me as a person, and it's been for the best. I'm able to help people more that have troubles with things that they may not understand, or for the most part, a good portion of people don't even believe in. I still work a normal job. I'm an average day Joe. I'm no different than everybody else that goes to Walmart or, buys something at Best Buy, get that new TV. But for sure, I have a totally different outlook at life. It's not just about driving the car, making a paycheck, and going to sleep and waking up and repeat. There's a totally different outlook at life now after 7 years of doing this stuff.
What would you think be the biggest change that you've had since that first paranormal experience of the girl screaming in the cemetery?
Biggest change, Ron, I would have to say everywhere I go, whether it's a job site, a pharmacy, a car lot, or even a field for a picnic. I mean, everywhere I go, I constantly question myself, what's here? Because the Earth's been around for millions of years, and there's so much history all around the world. And you may be in a field or a park, and it just seems like a park to you. There's nothing going on. But who's to say 150 years ago, there's a battle there, or, you had a family feud there, or a fire, or something of the such. So I have a different touch of everything that I see around me. It's like, what history is here? And is there anything attached from that time of that historical moment?
Do you have any regrets? Anything that you wish you hadn't done in the paranormal?
Well, I can say yes and no to this question, Ron, because the experience that I would say, yes, I regret, is also a great factor for me as a paranormal investigator. It's built me to who I am to help people today. But long story short, I took some quote-unquote souvenirs from a location one time thinking it's really cool. And when I took these souvenirs, it was because it was the first time that we experienced poltergeist activity.
Wow.
And I just thought tell me about it. And I just thought it was astounding. And I'm like, man, this would be great to take something home and remember this moment. Well, that was one of the biggest mistakes I could make, Ron, because following that night for the next 4.5 weeks, a little over a month, I had some really nasty stuff happen to me. And of course it stopped now. But that was a pretty crazy time for me.
A few weeks ago, you had sent in a story from an investigation you did at Central States Hospital. The response to that was, well, I just knew I had to have you live on the show. Do you have another story that you can share with us to kind of tell us and give us the feel of what it's like to be a paranormal investigator?
I sure do, Ron. And we can jump back to Central State if that's fine with you.
Oh, yeah, please.
Okay. Let's see. This next installment, I would say, would be about a month later after my first initial story with the woman in white.
Mm-hmm.
This takes place down in the tunnels of the Bard Treatment Center, which was the old surgery building of Central State Hospital. And we've been down there maybe for a good 3.5 hours. I mean, it's been a while, but it's still kind of early in the investigation. And as we're traveling through the tunnels, we recall hearing, reading some stories about how they used to chain up patients down there. And of course, they had some underground patient rooms and such like that. And not everybody treated everyone fair during that time, or even to this date, if it was still up, but they would mistreat these patients worse than they would with the ones that were above ground. And the patients that they would put down in the basement rooms were known to be criminally insane or just extremely violent, or they just couldn't find the right treatment for them. Well, there were also articles stating they wouldn't just put them in these underground rooms, but they would put them in these crawl spaces that were built into the wall.
Oh,
well,
man.
we stumbled across one of these crawl spaces, Ron, and we think to ourselves, well, if we climb up in there, it's about 5-7 feet above ground. We have to lift ourselves up to get into this crawl space.
Now, you didn't mention you were insane.
No, not one bit. Yeah, Ron, thinking back to it now, it's like, really? I mean, especially being 17, 18 years old, and it's like, we're jumping into these crawl spaces in a place that's completely abandoned, no lights. If your flashlight goes out and you don't have a cell phone with good battery or a light, you're pretty much done. You got to feel your way out. But yeah, we jump into the crawl space because we want to confirm, along with possibly being insane ourselves, Ron, we're looking for bones or chains or any type of physical evidence to prove that something happened, during the mid-1900s. So we look around, we can't find anything, not a physical evidence. But once we jumped into this crawl space, the crawl space is divided by different sections. Like the first section, it's pretty far back. It's probably 150 feet far back. Well, to the left is a little hatch, and it enters into another crawl space. So we go maybe 2 crawl spaces in, so we're into the third one. And that's where we stop, and we decide to do EVP sessions, bring out the K2 meters, and speak to the deceased that's known to be there. 20, 30 minutes in, roughly that type of duration, we're talking, nothing's going on. Well, we get the smart idea. This goes back to your question of us possibly being insane. We start provoking Ron.
Oh,
we're
no.
in a crawl space. Exactly. We're in a crawl space no more than 2 feet high, and we start provoking. And this goes back to us being naive. We're not being smart. We just want that evidence, So we start provoking, and we have one camera at the time. It's not a night vision camera, but it has a night shot to it. So it has a gray filter type of recording quality. But as we're recording, we start getting stuff after we provoke. And what I mean by getting stuff is we start getting pelted by rocks and little shards of glass. Yeah. And the fascinating part about this, Ron, is when these things are hitting us in the head, the foot, the leg, I mean, they're just lightly tapping us. It's not hurting or anything. It doesn't feel violent. But we're like, well, why did it take us all this time to provoke, and now we're finally getting all this activity? Well, let's not worry about that. We're getting paranormal activity. This is insane. We have rocks literally lifting off the ground and coming at us. That's just so cool. So, we're having a blast with this for probably about 10 minutes, and we feel things start to change. We get this inner gut feeling, kind of like how I described in the first story, that dark gut feeling. Things start changing. At first it started as a fascination, and it went into excitement. And now all of a sudden it's starting to go dark, like something feels wrong. Well, we start getting hit a little harder now. We're like, okay, maybe it's time to go. So we start crawling our way out. But before we leave, Ron, this is where I pick up that little rock. This is my first souvenir that changed my life for about a month. I pick up the first rock I got hit with, put it in my pocket, and we start to leave. Well, as we're leaving, you got to remember we have to go through 2 more additional crawl spaces before we can get back out into the main tunnel. So as we're leaving, we're getting pelted with rocks, but really fast now and a lot harder. It's starting to hurt. We're getting hit in the legs. We're getting hit in the head. It's hitting the side of the walls. There's pipes, and it's hitting the pipes. And we have this on EVP as well. With before we quit video, we kept the EVP running so you can hear all this. And it's just thinking back to it now, it's kind of got me in this daze like, wow, we actually dealt with that. Well,
that's my thought.
Yeah. Was that your thought as well? Well, we finally got back out into the tunnel, and we thought it would stop there. But rocks were starting to be thrown at us from the crawl space. And there were only 3 of us at the time. I should have mentioned that earlier. And rocks were being thrown at us from outside the crawl space. Now, not to be funny, but we didn't find anybody, that's homeless that was living in this area. No animals, no random kids trying to do a prank. I mean, it was clear as day. I promise you, Ron, and to everyone that's listening, these rocks were being lifted up and levitating to us. Well, this freaked us out enough. We found the closest staircase to get out, and we took it up to the main floor on the ground level, and we found the first exit. Well, this first exit that we found was completely boarded up and chained. So we discovered that we had to go back the way that we came, go back down into the basement where we were being attacked by this alleged poltergeist, and go the whole entire, maybe quarter of a mile worth of tunnels that we originally traveled to get where we were. We had to go through all these tunnels to get back to the women's ward, to go back up and finally get out the original entrance and exit that we entered through. And that entire time, Ron, we were being chased by whatever this thing was, and it was throwing rocks, and we even got a 2x4 thrown at us. Piece of wood. It was terrifying. And I guess this goes back to the regret. I really wish I had a high-quality night vision camera or a GoPro strapped to me, because, man, Ron, let me tell you, it was it was out of this world. But, yeah, that was another great encounter that we had at Central State.
Well, that place is just known for being haunted, and to hear a story like that doesn't surprise me, but it's just absolutely terrifying. I can't imagine how you kept your heads. Or did you lose it? I mean, did you lose it at any point?
Well, there were a couple of times, Ron. Being in the moment, I guess with so much adrenaline going through our veins and just being so intrigued by the paranormal, we didn't really care at the moment about what it could be or what it wasn't. So that kind of drove us to be like, oh, this is awesome. And, man, this is scary, but, I don't care. This is not something you get to witness every day. It wasn't until after our investigations, especially at, Central State, once we got home, that's when we sat down and we really contemplated what we had just went through. And it's like, is this really smart? Should we keep going through this? Should we make a different approach so we don't have these type of outcomes? It wasn't until we got home is when it really hit.
Sounds like that was a real game-changing moment for you.
It was, absolutely. I would say that night was when we started to think about respect and the whole saying a prayer, what can we do to keep ourselves more protected? Because before that night, we have never felt threatened or, for sure, oh my God, there's something paranormal. It wasn't until that night when we really started to think about what we're doing.
So what kinds of things are your team doing now? I believe you told me beforehand that you're working on something, the IBVU?
Yes, that's correct. We're actually doing a couple of presentations here in Indiana. And this goes back to how you said, how has things changed and how are we able to help people now? Well, since last year, 2017, we had a event at the Central Public Library downtown of Indianapolis where we had a public talk seminar. And we're doing the same thing at the Ivy Boo, which takes place at Ivy Tech Community College in Greencastle, Indiana. And what we do at these seminars is we speak to people about the paranormal basics. We tell them about the do's and the don'ts, talk about our personal experiences, kind of give them a little basic information of what you can expect, what you can expect with the paranormal, just things that your everyday person that doesn't investigate may or may not know or just wants to recap on.
And when is this?
The Ivy Boo will actually be October 12th this year, Ron.
So we're recording this on October 3rd. I'm not sure exactly when it'll be aired, but if you do live in the Indiana area and you want to find out more about you, I guess you'd invite everybody to come hear what you have to say.
Absolutely, Ron. Yeah, it's going to be on a Friday from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m., and all of these seminars, all the events that we attend and that we help host are free of charge. We're a community event, which we act like a nonprofit, but we're not registered as a nonprofit, so that's why we come out as a community event. But everything we do is to give back to the community and try to help people out and make them feel comfortable. And we believe that's a better thing to do is give back to the community with something free. The stuff's real, and we want to help.
So if people want to get in contact with you, what do they need to do?
Ron, there's a couple of things that they can do. They can go to Facebook and type in P.I.O.T. Paranormal, and we should pop up. You'll see our little logo with the white ghost face and the black background. Or if you have an Instagram, you can type in P.I.O.T. Paranormal. We should pop up with the same logo. Or if you don't have either and you just want to send an email or be more anonymous, you can go to Google and type in P.I.O.T. Paranormal, and you'll find our official website, which is PIOTparanormal.com.
Okay, and I will put all those in the show notes as well, so that if you do want to contact these guys, you can do it. Well, Schuler, I'm going to say it has been a pleasure to have you on the show. You sent chills through my body several times during your during your story. I can't imagine what that must have been like, but I applaud you for doing the job that a lot of people just quite honestly don't have the guts to even think about doing. And so thank you for being part of Ron's Amazing Stories.
Well, thank you for having me, Ron, and thank you for the kind compliments.
That was a fascinating chat, and I want to thank Schuler for taking the time to come on the show. If you missed any of the links that Schuler spoke of, I will have them in the show notes.
As read by Amazing Stories, read by amazing people.
This time on As Read By, we have a short story from listener Amelia Allison, who is 11 years old. She lives in Grandview, New York, and sent in this story she simply calls My Friendly Ghost. I wake up each morning to a friendly ghost. His name is not Casper, but he is just as friendly. I first met Tony when we moved into my new home. He had been left behind by the previous owners who had told him he couldn't go with them. For a very long time he was sad about this and tried to scare everyone away who came to look to buy the house. Just didn't want any new friends. When Daddy and I came to look at the house, I felt like I wasn't alone from the very start. Dad told me to look around the house to see what I thought and to find a room that I could make my very own. I did just that, and as it turns out, it happened to be the very same room where my friendly ghost also resided. As I entered the room, there was a terrible little scream coming from the closet. I walked up to it, opened the door, only to see a small boy sitting there looking at me more frightened than I was. I asked, "What's your name?" He told me that his name was Tony and that he had been left behind by the last people who owned the house. We talked for a very long time, and he asked me if I was going to be moving in. I don't know how I knew, but I told him I was. 2 weeks later, I was unpacking my boxes in my brand new room with my friend Tony. At first, the road was a bit rough because my parents didn't believe that Tony existed. They called him my invisible friend. Tony didn't care for this very much, and over time my parents came to realize that Tony was a real ghost and real friendly. He would move things about the house, hide Daddy's keys, be as helpful as he could, and of course, as playful as he could. In the end, Tony became a family member just as important as Chico, my dog. Amelia Allison, Grandview, New York. What a great story, Amelia, and thank you so much for sending it in. I think you should become a writer one day. You tell such good stories. If you have any more of these, please do send them in. We want to hear them. Thank you, Amelia. Do you have a story like Amelia? Why not send it in yourself? Just head to ronsamazingstories.com and click on the story submission banner. Fill out the form, and you know what? The next thing you'll hear is your story being read, or you'll be reading it yourself. Why not do it today? I know everyone out there has a story. As I mentioned earlier, we have 3 paranormal investigators on the program. Jordan Childs is listed as one of the most calm members of P.I.O.T. I was able to sit down with Jordan and hear one of the most terrifying stories I've heard yet. But I'll not give the story away now and let Jordan himself tell us all about his adventure. I want to welcome to the podcast Jordan Childs, promotion manager, audio specialist, and researcher for the team. Hello, Jordan.
Hey, how you doing, Ron?
So how long have you been a member of Paranormal Investigations?
Since 2011.
So you're a core member then?
Yes, sir.
Now, I was told by Schuler that you have a story about almost being possessed?
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
Well, can we hear it?
Oh, definitely. Well, it was me, Schuler, and other paranormal investigators that were with us. And I remember feeling funny. But keep in mind, it was in October, so I automatically assumed that it was cold because I kept shivering and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the investigators kept checking up on me, asking me if I was okay. I felt as if something was entering me. It was a different type of cold, like something was entering inside of my body. I started shaking, panicking. I couldn't get control of myself.
Was this at Central States?
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir. We was leaving the women's ward. We had just got done doing an investigation there, and that's when I just started feeling funny. And the last thing I remember was being at this church. And I remember asking Schuler, hey, what's going on? How come we're not doing more investigations? And he was telling me that I had been possessed during that night. And, this is my fault. It was completely unprofessional on my part. I was provoking the spirits, and I even allowed them to use my energy because I had asked them to or told them to.
Oh, boy.
And that's one of the biggest regrets I had ever done because I literally felt something entering inside of my body at that point. One of the worst feelings I had in the world, Ron. I still remember it like it was yesterday. But I don't remember what all I was doing. But Schuler was saying that I was, carrying on, acting different, punching, kicking, spitting. And, I'm not the type of person to do that. When he was telling me that, I was quite surprised.
From your perspective, what do you think happened? Do you really feel like you were just taken away somewhere else and then this whatever had taken complete control?
I believe so, because I don't remember anything besides the shaking and shivering I was doing that night.
Wow. And then you woke up in a church.
Yes, it was in a church, but all of us were inside of the car. I remember going inside of the car. It was Schuler's car. I was asking him, what happened? And he was saying that I got borderline possessed.
Wow. From Schuler's perspective, are you still there, Schuler?
Oh, yeah, Ron, right here.
Tell the story from your viewpoint.
We're actually down in the tunnels of the women's ward. It is a little bit further away from the bar treatment, the surgery ward. And when he blacked out, that's when he started acting funny. After he did all this provocation and offering this energy, he just kind of stopped for a moment. He was behind the rest of the group at this time, and I do believe there were 5 of us that night. He just got real quiet, and he was being loud, not 5 minutes ago. I looked back at him, I'm like, Jordan, are you okay? He was like, I'm fine. I'm like, okay, that's not the Jordan I know. I'm like, are you sure? Do you want to, take a break? Do you want to get some water or something? Of course, there's like a 3-second pause, and he's like, no, I'm fine. All right. Well, he starts mumbling and speaking underneath his breath, and he's starting to curse. And that's when we stop, and we're like, all right, I think we need to stop the investigation tonight. But that's when we decide to leave, and Jordan tells us, no, we're not leaving. We're going to stay. And I'm thinking, well, this is really different of Jordan. He's more mellow and okay to leave if we're done. He's not going to be against that. So as we try to leave, Jordan, he's not moving, so we try to move him, politely. And that's when he starts, as he said, spitting at us, throwing more curses at us. He even throws some punches and tries to kick us. So myself and another investigator, we actually had to subdue him to a point and forcefully walk him out of the tunnels. And that's, as we got him through the tunnels, we got him back to the women's ward and got him upstairs, got back to the ground floor. The entire time, he's still cursing, still throwing punches and all that fun stuff. And as we get him closer to the open field that's in front of the entire perimeter of the Central State area, that's when he gets really, really violent with us. He's like, no, I don't want to leave. no, we need to stay. No, we need to go back. And he tries to break from us. And that's when we actually start jogging with him a little bit. We're like, no, Jordan, you can't. You got to come back, man. You got to fight. We feel like there's nothing in you that you can't fight. We know you're still there. You need to come back. It was just a really weird environment, Ron. Thinking back to it now, I'm kind of feeling the emotion of trying to help Jordan. It was, I wouldn't say panicky, but I was concerned. But I was also at that point where I felt like I had to be strong because my friend, not just my member of my team, but my friend is actually having a problem that he's never experienced before. So as we start jogging out towards the field, we see a Catholic church to the right. And that's where we head to. We're like, okay, thank God there's something holy around here that can help us work with what we're dealing with. Well, we finally get him to the church. We sit him down on the front steps because this is roughly 2:30 in the morning, so the church is closed. And we start saying prayers over him, and we have to hold him down because he's just cursing, telling us this, telling us that, and he wants to go back to Central State. And we sit over him for like 25 minutes, holding him down and saying prayers, and he finally comes back too. And that's where Jordan goes into his part of the story, saying he only remembers walking towards my car, getting back in, and leaving. And like, are you guys sure we're done for the night? I thought we were still going to go on for another couple hours. And like, no, Jordan, not after what we just went through.
So Jordan, does any of that ring a bell to you? You don't remember any of that?
I don't remember anything besides being at the church, and that's I'm still surprised about it because, like I said, I'm not the type of person to do that, and me doing that and not realizing I'm in action of doing it is creepy.
What was the fallout of it? What did you feel? Well, you eventually had to go home. What was that like?
I was in disbelief. I couldn't believe that it happened. You know, just thinking about it on the way home, I'm just thinking in the back of my mind, like, did I really do all of this? I mean, did I really allow something to enter me when I was provoking? When I said, y'all can use my energy? And I just felt regret that night, disbelief, and sadness too, because I was just sad over the fact, like, all that happened to me. It was definitely a life lesson too. You know, don't ever provoke spirits. Never do something that you're not ready to get into, especially at that moment.
Any lasting effects that hung on from this encounter?
I have to say maybe my anxiety increased a lot. And
well, that's a given, I think, given what happened.
Yeah. It's like ever since that night, in all seriousness, my anxiety did get the better of me at that point. And just being paranoid because you never know what's going to happen. And, you shouldn't take advantage of a situation like that, especially provoking like I did that night. It was definitely a life changer.
Well, Jordan, I want to thank you for sharing that with us. I can't imagine that it's easy to go back and even think about.
Yeah, and anytime, Ron, anytime.
All right. I'm floored by that story. I just don't have words.
Of course, Ron. Nope. Yeah, we're still floored by it to this day, Ron.
Yeah, think about it, moment of it.
Yeah, we hope your listeners enjoyed it just as well. It wasn't enjoyable at the time, but to tell it now,
For me, to close this off, I guess that we are compelled to do these things, and when we do, we learn what to do, I guess. And I think that's the important thing here, is you wouldn't do that again, I'm assuming.
No, sir.
I don't think so, Ron.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. I'm sure that people are going to enjoy what they've heard and maybe even be a little terrified. And then one more time, that's the Paranormal Investigation and Observation Groups. And you guys are based in...
that's Indianapolis, Indiana, Ron.
Hopefully some people will contact you with some questions, and maybe they even need some help. So if they do, I'm sure they'll help you out.
We'd love to.
What an incredible and amazing story. I want to thank Jordan and Schuler for telling it to us. It just reinforces the idea that there's a whole lot out there that we just don't understand and probably never will. Again, I will have all of the links to Team P.I.O.T. in the show notes. Thank you, guys. I want to thank all the contributors this time: Amelia Allison, Tom Williams, Jason Dowd, Schuler Johnson, and Jordan Childs. You guys are the best. On the next podcast, we conclude the month of spooky with the 8th annual Old Time Horror with Jim Harold. Jim has been with us every Halloween since the podcast began, and this time we're going to talk about old-time zombies. They're older than you think. If you want to follow the podcast or the blog, just head to ronsamazingstories.com. There you'll find all of the links you'll need. And please leave some reviews or feedback about the show. It really does help us to grow. Thank you for listening, and I hope you come again to find out what are Ron's Amazing Stories.
All of the vintage audio used in the podcast is believed to be in the public domain. Ron's Amazing Stories does not own the rights to any of the old-time radio used here. If you hold the rights to any of the shows played, please contact us immediately at ronsamazingstories.com.